Okay, we are recording. We are currently in Cami, the website, the application, and you have a bunch of ways you can underline. I have a stylus, so I like using this little drawing thing here. I can choose a color, and I can choose a thickness, and I can choose a density of what I'm drawing. So here I'm choosing a kind of a purpley pinky thing, and I chose a thickness, and it will give me a line like that. Okay, so that's going to be different than what I already wrote on this, because I already wrote and did some recording. I also have a pointer that'll give me, okay. You also could use this markup tool. This markup tool will highlight text by line. So if you don't have a stylus, it might be easy enough to do this one. Why that not work? Box highlighter, line text highlighter. I think it works on your side. Anyway, good morning. How's it going, Igor? Okay, so here we go with the story. Federigo's Falcon. Igor, we're trying to open up this story. Okay. All right. Federigo's Falcon. This was written by Giovanni Boccaccio. Boccaccio wrote a collection of short stories. It was called the Decameron, and it was kind of fun for people of that era to have 100 short stories that were funny and interesting and focused on the human condition, like greed and envy and love and all that kind of stuff, rather than a lot of the writing back in those days was religious. Okay, so it was the Bible and poems and psalms and all these things about religion. So it was kind of fun for people of that era to have some, just fun stories. Okay, in this story, a man loses everything for his love of a rich lady, and we're going to be looking for irony and figurative language. Last time we read a story, we were looking for characterization. So, see if I can scroll up. I can. Here goes the story. There was once in Florence a young man named Federigo, the son of Messer Filippo Alberighi, renowned above all other men in Tuscany for his prowess in arms and for his courtliness. Apparently, we are in Italy, and the guy is known for being really good with a sword and having manners. As often happens to most gentlemen, he fell in love with a lady named Monna Giovanna, in her day considered to be one of the most beautiful and one of the most charming women that ever there were in Florence. In order to win her love, he participated in jousts and tournaments. Some people reading this might be interested in what they expected women to be, was beautiful and charming, and what they expected men to be was, fighting with swords and being in tournaments. So there's certain gender bias in this story. Okay, he participated in jousts and tournaments, organized and gave feasts, and spent his money without restraint. But she, no less virtuous than beautiful, for the young woman was already married, cared little for these things done on her behalf, nor did she care for him who did them. Now, as Federigo was spending far beyond his means and was taking nothing in, as easily happens, he lost his wealth and became poor, with nothing but his little farm to his name, from whose revenues he lived very meagerly, and one falcon, which was among the best in the world. A little story about falcons. Way back in the day, and people still do this, they would train a falcon to go do what it naturally does, which is go attack a bird and kill it and capture it. But they would train it to bring it back to them so that they could use this falcon for bird hunting. They could take it out in the countryside. It would go catch some birds for them, and they could bring the birds home and eat them for dinner. So he had this trained bird. Okay, but he lost all his money because he's an idiot. He was spending it on a woman. More in love than ever, but knowing that he would never be able to live the way he wished to in the city, he went to live at Campy, where his farm was. There he passed his time hawking whatever he could, asking nothing of anyone, and endured his poverty patiently. There's another medieval trait, being patient and enduring. Now, during the time that Federico was reduced to dire need, it happened that the husband of Mona Giovanna fell ill, and realizing death was near, he made his last will. He was very rich, and he made his son, who was growing up, his heir, and since he had loved Mona Giovanna very much, he made her his heir, should his son die without a legitimate heir, and then he died. Very interesting concept here. You have the man dying, so he makes his will, and he makes his son his heir, so his son gets all his money. And in case his son doesn't have a son, he made his wife get his money. And we're thinking, wait a minute, doesn't the wife always get the money? Back in the old days, the custom was the property belonged to men. And in some way, don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger, in some way, the woman was the man's property. And that's why the woman changed her last name to the same name as his. What? Mona Giovanna was now a widow, and as is the custom among our women, she went to the country with her son to spend a year on one of her possessions very close by to Federigo's farm. And it happened that this young boy became friends with Federigo and began to enjoy birds and hunting dogs, and after he had seen Federico's falcon fly many times, it pleased him so much that he very much wished it were his own. But he did not dare to ask for it, for he could see how dear it was to Federigo. And during this time, it happened that the young boy took ill. Okay, so the boy gets sick, and his mother was much grieved, for he was her only child, and she loved him enormously. She would spend the entire day by his side, never ceasing to comfort him, and often asking him if there was anything he desired, begging him to tell her what it might be, for if it were possible to obtain it, she would certainly do everything possible to get it. After the young bird heard him make this offer many times, he said, "Mother, if you can arrange for me to have Federigo's falcon, I think I would be well very soon." So the snotty little boy asked for the falcon. And what do you think the mom is going to do about that? She's a mom and her kid is sick, and the kid just asked for something. Maybe she's going to try to get the falcon. When the lady heard this, she was taken aback for a moment, and she began to think what she should do. She knew that Federigo had loved her for a long while. Oh, so she knows that Federigo loves her. Maybe she can get the falcon from him? In spite of the fact that he never received a single glance from her. And so she said to herself, "How can I send or go and ask for this falcon of his, which is, as I have heard tell, the best that ever flew, and besides, his only means of support?" So he uses this falcon to get birds that he can eat. It is the only way that he can eat. He has this falcon that can hunt for him. "And how can I be so insensitive as to wish to take away from this gentleman the only pleasure which is left to him?" and involved in these thoughts, knowing that she was certain to have the bird if she asked for it, but not knowing what to say to her son, she stood there without answering him. Finally, the love she bore her son persuaded her that she should make him happy, and no matter what the consequences might be, she would not send for the bird. She would not send for the bird, but rather go herself for it and bring it back to him. So she answered her son, "My son, take comfort, and think only of getting well, for I promise you that the first thing I shall do tomorrow morning is to go for it and bring it back to you." Okay, so she decides, she knows it's not right to play on this guy's love for her, but she's going to go get this bird. The child was so happy that he showed some improvement that very day. The following morning, the lady, accompanied by another woman, as if going for a stroll, went to Federigo's modest house and asked for him. Since it was not the season for it, Federigo had not been hawking for some days and was in his orchard, attending to certain tasks. When he heard that Monna Giovanni was asking for him at the door, he was very surprised and happy to run there. As she saw him coming, she greeted him with feminine charm, and once Federigo had welcomed her courteously, she said, "Wait a minute. She greeted him with feminine charm? Are they saying that she turned on the charm for him and tried to trick him with her ladiness?" She said, "Greetings, Federigo." Then she continued, "I have come to compensate you for the harm you have suffered on my account." Wait a minute, how's she going to give him something for his harm? "Suffered on my account by loving me more than you needed to. And the compensation is this. I, along with this companion of mine, intend to dine with you, a simple meal, this very day." Oh, she's going to pay him back by just sitting and having a meal with him? She thinks her company is that, amazing? To this, Federigo humbly replied, "Madonna, I never remember having suffered any harm because of you. On the contrary, so much good have I received from you that if I have been worth anything, it has been because of your merit and the love I bore for you. And your generous visit is certainly so dear to me that I would spend all over again that which I spent in the past. But you have come to a poor host." So apparently he thinks just loving her was enough. And having said this, he received her into his home humbly, and from there he led her into his garden, and since he had no one there to keep her company, he said, "My lady." No, this is him. "My lady, since there is no one else, this good woman here, the wife of this workman, will keep you company while I go and set the table." What's he going to go and set the table with? He doesn't have anything. Okay, where did I leave off? Okay, so he's going to go and set the table. And though he was very poor, Federigo, until now, had never before realized to what extent he had wasted his wealth. Remember, he had wasted his wealth by trying to show off for her? But this morning, the fact that he found nothing with which he could honor the lady for the love of whom he had once entertained countless men in the past gave him cause to reflect. In great anguish, he cursed himself. So he knew he'd caused his own problem and his fortune, and, like a man beside himself, he started running here and there, but could find neither money nor a pawnable object. Yeah, hold on one second. Okay, he cursed his fortune, and like a man beside himself, he started running here and there, but could find neither money nor a pawnable object. The hour was late, and his desire to honor the gracious lady was great, but not wishing to turn to help for others. So he doesn't want to ask anyone for help or ask anyone for money, not even his own workmen. He set his eyes upon his good falcon, perched in a small room, and since he had nowhere else to turn, he took the bird, and finding it plump, he decided that it would be a worthy food for such a lady. What's he planning to do? He's going to cook that. So, without further thought, he wrung its neck and quickly gave it to his servant girl to pluck, prepare, and place on a spit to be roasted with care. And when he had set the table with the whitest of tablecloths, a few of which he still had left, he returned with a cheerful face to the lady in his garden, saying that the meal he was able to prepare for her was ready. Now, this is interesting. How long does it take to prepare a meal like that? It's hours, isn't it? So she's been sitting in the garden waiting for hours.
It depends on how he cooks it.
He cooked it on a spit,
What's a spit
like a stick. Yeah.
Well, that could go pretty fast.
He could do it pretty fast. Okay, so she was sitting for a while, but maybe not hours.
Maybe like an hour.
Maybe an hour. Okay. The lady and her companion Rose went to the table together with Federigo, who waited upon them with the greatest devotion, and they ate the good falcon without knowing what it was they were eating. And having left the table and spent some time in pleasant conversation, the lady thought it time now to say what she had come to say. Wait a minute. Hadn't she come to say that she wanted the falcon? Uh-oh. And so she spoke these kind words to Federigo. Federigo, if you recall your past life and my virtue, which you perhaps took for harshness. What she's saying is her virtue was that she didn't pay any attention to him, right? She could have cheated on her husband with him, but she didn't. Which you perhaps took from harshness and cruelty. I do not doubt at all that you will be amazed by my presumption when you hear what my main reason for coming here is. But if you had children through whom you might have experienced the power of parental love, it seems certainty to me that you would, at least in part, forgive me. But just as you have no child, I do have one, and cannot escape the common laws of other mothers. The force of such laws compels me to follow them, against my own will, and against good manners and duty. She's saying she's about to ask him for something. She doesn't really want to do it, because it's not really what she wants, and it's not good manners to do it. And to ask of you a gift which I know is most precious to you, and is naturally so, since your extreme condition has left you no other delight, no other pleasure, no other consolation. And this gift is your falcon, which my son is so taken by. This gift is your falcon, which my son is so taken by that if I do not bring it to him, I fear his sickness will grow so much worse that I may lose him. And therefore I beg you, not because of the love that you bear for me, which does not oblige you in the least, but because of your own nobility. Now, here we are referencing nobility and this kind of love that he had. This is kind of like the knight in shining armor kind of love. The medieval concept of nobility. You were born with land, so that makes you a better person and you have to behave better than regular people. Because of your nobility, which you have shown to be greater than that of all others practicing courtliness, that is, behaving in a way like a noble would, that you will be pleased to give it to me so that I may say that I have saved the life of my son by means of this gift. And because of it, I have placed him in your debt forever. When he heard that the lady requested, and knew that he could not oblige her, since he had just given her the falcon to eat, Federigo began to weep in her presence, for he could not utter a word in reply. The lady at first thought his tears were caused by the sorrow of having to part with the good falcon than by anything else, and she was on the verge of telling him she no longer wished it, but she held back and waited for Federigo's reply after he stopped weeping, and he said, My lady, ever since it pleased God for me to place my love in you, I have felt that fortune has been hostile to me in many things. We have two competing interests here. We have the God thing that they're talking about in 1300, so we're talking Christianity, God, and then fortune, which was an older religion. The Romans had all these different gods, one of which was fortune, which would decide your fate and your luck. So he's got these two different religions going in his brain. I have felt that fortune has been hostile to me in many things, and I have complained to her. But All of this is nothing compared to what she has just done to me. Fortune, this god of luck. And I must never be at peace with her again, thinking about how you have come here to put my poor home where, while it was rich, you never deigned to come. So she had never come to his home earlier. And you requested a small gift, and fortune worked to make it impossible for me to give it to you. And why this is so, I shall tell you briefly. When I heard that you, out of your kindness, interesting irony, right? She did not come out of kindness, did she? When I heard that you, out of your kindness, wished to dine with me, I considered it fitting and right, taking into account your excellence and your worthiness, that I should honor you according to my possibilities with a more precious food than that which I usually serve to other people. Therefore, remembering the falcon that you requested and its value, I judged it a food worthy of you. And this very day, you had it roasted and served to you as best I could. But seeing now that you desired it another way, my sorrow in not being able to serve you is so great that I shall never be able to console myself again. Apparently, he thinks his job is to serve his lady, even though she doesn't love him. That's a concept of courtly love, medieval love, where he's supposed to serve her. And after he had said this, he laid the feathers, the feet, and the beak of the bird before her as proof. And when the lady heard and saw this, she first reproached him for having killed such a falcon to serve as a meal to a woman. But then to herself she commended the greatness of his spirit, which no poverty was able or would be able to diminish. And then, having lost all hope of getting the falcon, and perhaps because of this, improving the health of her son as well, she thanked Federigo both for the honor paid to her and for his goodwill, and she left in grief and returned to her son, to his mother's extreme sorrow, either because of his disappointment that he could not have the falcon or because his illness must have necessarily led to it. The boy passed from this life only a few days later. So the boy dies, maybe because he didn't get the falcon, or maybe because he was sick. After the period of her mourning and bitterness had passed, the lady was repeatedly urged by her brothers to remarry, since she was very rich and still young. And although she did not wish to do so, they became so insistent that she remembered the merits of Federigo and his last act of generosity, that is, to have killed such a falcon to do her honor. And she said to her brothers, I would prefer to remain a widow, if that would please you. But if you wish me to take a husband, you may rest assured I shall take no man but Federigo degli Alberghi. To answer this, making fun of her, her brothers replied, You foolish woman, what are you saying? How can you want him? He hasn't a penny to his name. And to this she replied, My brothers, I am well aware of what you say, but I would rather have a man who needs money than a money that needs a man. So she would rather marry a guy who doesn't have money than marry a guy that's looking for money. Or, no, she'd rather have a man that has no money than have a bunch of money and marry just because she has money. Oh, that's right, because in those times, a woman couldn't own property. So the only way that she could hold on to the property and keep it in her family is if she got married, because the money would follow the males around. Her brothers, seeing that she was determined and knowing Federico to be of noble birth, no matter how poor he was, accepted her wishes and gave her in marriage to him. So the men give the women away as if they're property, with all her riches, when he found himself the husband of such a great lady whom he had loved so much and who was so wealthy. Besides, he managed his financial affairs with more prudence than in the past and lived with her happily the rest of his days. The end. All right, you do not need to answer the questions that are here. Those questions, I'm going to replace them with my own questions. Okay, so you can just skip all the questions at the end. and just underlined.